Savannah Carter hunched over in the hard, plastic airport seat, tugging the hood of her oversized sweatshirt over her head. She was just 15, traveling alone from Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport after spending 2 weeks visiting her aunt in Miami. The trip had been her mother's idea, a way to shake off the stress of school and maybe even help her get over her parents' recent divorce. But now, all Savannah wanted was to get home. The flight was delayed, and the boredom was starting to claw at her. She absent-mindedly scrolled through her phone, her backpack resting between her feet like a shield. Music pulsed through her earbuds, but even that couldn't drown out the tired groans of frustrated passengers around her. A couple arguing over a missed connection. A businessman grumbling into his phone about a lost deal. All of it blurred into the same dull airport ambiance. What broke through the noise, though, was the sensation of being watched. That prickling, uneasy feeling crept along her skin. Savannah glanced up and caught the eyes of an older woman seated a few rows away. The woman's gaze wasn't casual. It was the kind that lingered, sharp and heavy. The type of stare that made you feel like you'd done something wrong without even knowing what. She tried to brush it off, forcing herself to focus on her phone. People stared sometimes. Maybe it was her unruly hair or her favorite hoodie that had seen better days. Maybe it was nothing. But the woman's expression stayed with her, needling at the edges of her mind. And when she saw the woman lean over and whisper to a nearby airport employee, Savannah's stomach twisted with a chill she couldn't quite shake. But when the uniformed man approached her, his posture stiff and his eyes already full of suspicion, Savannah realized the woman's stares weren't just paranoia. Something was about to go very, very wrong. The man's voice cut through Savannah's music like a knife. "Excuse me, miss. Can I see your boarding pass?" Savannah blinked up at him, her body tensing. He wore a neatly pressed uniform, his expression locked somewhere between stern and annoyed. She fumbled with her phone, yanking out an earbud. Sure," she replied, her voice shaky as she dug into her hoodie pocket and handed him the crumpled boarding pass. He inspected the paper, flipping it over as if expecting it to be a fake. His eyebrows drew together. "Are you traveling alone?" "Yeah, I do this all the time." The words slipped out faster than she intended, her voice trying to mask the fear knotting in her stomach. But his gaze remained cold, unreadable. "I need to see your ID as well." Savannah hesitated, glancing around. No one else was being questioned. Businessmen in suits, families wrangling children, teenagers giggling over snacks, everyone else was left alone. Only her. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her fingers trembling as she pulled her wallet from her backpack. "Routine security check," he replied curtly. "Just verifying information." The way his eyes drilled into her, though, made Savannah feel anything but safe. She handed him her high school ID, the only one she had. He barely looked at it before speaking again. "Where are your parents?" Savannah frowned, her brows knitting together. "I'm 15. I don't need my parents with me. I'm just flying home." The air felt thick, like all the oxygen had been sucked from the terminal. Savannah knew something was wrong. But causing a scene would only make it worse. "Stay here," the man ordered before turning on his heel and walking away, her boarding pass clutched in his hand. Savannah watched him leave, her pulse thudding in her ears. The woman from earlier was now whispering to another employee, her eyes darting toward Savannah with the same sharp suspicion. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, Savannah knew better. Savannah's fingers gripped her phone like a lifeline. The man had taken her boarding pass, her only ticket home, and now he was gone, leaving her stranded in a terminal that suddenly felt hostile. She tried to breathe, to calm herself down. Maybe it really was just a random check. Maybe he'd come back and apologize for wasting her time. But the way the woman kept glancing at her, that nasty, judgmental look in her eyes, it felt personal. like Savannah had been marked as trouble from the moment she walked in. A few minutes later, 2 more airport employees marched toward her. One was a towering, gangly man in a TSA uniform, his face stretched into a stern frown. The other was a petite woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard clutched to her chest like a weapon. They looked like the kind of people who enjoyed making other people's days miserable. "Miss Carter?" the woman asked, her voice tight and impatient. "Yeah?" Savannah's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Please come with us." Savannah glanced around, hoping someone would step in and say this was a mistake. But no one paid her any attention. "Just another kid at an airport, right?" "Why?" she asked, her chest tightening. "Your ticket was flagged for a security check," the TSA officer said. His tone was light, like he was trying to convince her this wasn't a big deal. But his eyes? They said otherwise. Savannah stood, her backpack straps digging into her shoulders. "Flagged? Why?" "Random screening," the woman replied, her forced smile looking more like a grimace. "Nothing to worry about." But Savannah's gut twisted. Nothing about this felt random. The way the woman's gaze flicked over her, the way the TSA officer hovered too close like he expected her to bolt at any second. This wasn't about airport safety. No, this was about her. And the worst part? No one seemed to care. The hallway they led Savannah down was cold and sterile, the kind of place where bad news happened. Her sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor as they guided her to a tiny screening room tucked away from the bustling terminal. It looked like a sad, windowless office someone had tried to pretend was official. There was a metal table, 2 plastic chairs, and an uncomfortable-looking man leaning against the wall like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Set your bag down," the woman snapped, her voice sharper than a paper cut. Savannah hesitated, her fingers tightening around the straps of her backpack. "I don't understand. I already went through security." "We need to ask a few questions," the man grunted, pushing off the wall like his bones ached just from standing. "Where are you flying to?" "Atlanta." Savannah's voice shook, and she hated that it did. She wanted to sound tough, unbothered. But her heart was slamming against her ribs like it was trying to break free. "Who bought your ticket?" The woman pressed, scribbling something down on her clipboard like Savannah had just admitted to a crime. "My mom?" Savannah answered, her eyes narrowing. "Why does that matter? Just answer the questions." Savannah huffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Look, I've flown alone before, and this has never happened. Why am I being questioned like this?" The woman's forced smile faltered, her pen hovering above the clipboard. "Your ticket was flagged. It happens sometimes." "Yeah?" Savannah shot back. "Funny how sometimes never happens to anybody else." The stocky man's eyes narrowed. "Miss, are you refusing to cooperate?" Savannah's stomach dropped, but her anger burned hotter. "I'm not refusing anything. I just want to know why you're treating me like I'm some kind of criminal." The woman glanced at her partner, her eyes twitching with annoyance. "We're just following protocol." Savannah wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe this was just some horrible mistake. But the way they were looking at her, like she was already guilty of something, it was all she could do not to scream. The tension in the room was suffocating, pressing down on Savannah's chest until she could hardly breathe. They'd already gone through her backpack like it was filled with nuclear secrets. Clothes, charger, headphones, a half-eaten pack of gummy bears, all dumped out and inspected with the kind of scrutiny that made her feel more like a criminal than a kid trying to catch a flight. "Step over here, please," the woman instructed, her tone clipped and impatient. "Why?" Savannah asked, her arms folded protectively across her chest. Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure they could hear it. "We need to take your picture for documentation," the woman said, her smile so fake it made Savannah's skin crawl. Savannah's mouth dropped open. "What? Why would you need a picture of me?" You already have my ID. Standard procedure, the woman replied, her gaze cool and dismissive. If you've got nothing to hide, then there's nothing to worry about. The man beside her was already gripping his radio like he was ready to call in backup if Savannah so much as blinked wrong. This is insane, Savannah said, her voice rising despite her best efforts to stay calm. I've done nothing wrong. Why are you treating me like some sort of terrorist? Miss, calm down, the man said, his eyes narrowing as if her frustration was somehow proof of guilt. Calm down? Savannah scoffed. You guys are the ones dragging me into some creepy back room and shaking my stuff out like you're expecting to find a bomb. The woman's expression tightened. Enough. Either you cooperate or we will have no choice but to involve airport security. Savannah's heart twisted painfully. This was spiraling way out of control. She was just a kid trying to get home, but they were acting like she was a threat. No, Savannah snapped, her eyes blazing with panic and fury. You don't get to treat me like this. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. And judging by the man's hand reaching for his radio, they were about to make things even worse. Savannah's hands trembled, but she kept her chin up, refusing to shrink under their condescending stares. The man with the radio already had it pressed to his mouth, his expression rigid and full of self-importance. Security to screening room B, he said, his voice low and controlled, like he'd been waiting for this moment all day. Possible non-compliant passenger. Non-compliant? Savannah echoed, her voice breaking with frustration. I'm a kid trying to catch a flight home. What part of that screams non-compliant to you? But they didn't answer. The woman with the clipboard just watched her, pen poised to scribble down every word she said like it was ammunition. The whole thing felt like a sick joke. Seconds later, a new man strode into the room, a security officer with broad shoulders, a stern expression, and a uniform pressed so sharply it looked like it could slice through paper. His eyes swept over Savannah with the kind of authority that made her stomach twist. What's the problem here? He asked, his voice a gruff rumble. She's refusing to comply with a simple photo for documentation, the clipboard lady replied, her tone dripping with irritation. That's not true, Savannah snapped, her voice shaking. You guys are blowing this way out of proportion. I went through security like everyone else. You've searched my bag, you've questioned me like I'm smuggling weapons, and now you want my picture? For what? The security officer narrowed his eyes. Miss, if you cooperate, this will be over much faster. Savannah's chest felt tight. How could they act like she was the unreasonable one when they were the ones making her feel like a criminal? No, this is wrong. I haven't done anything. The man sighed, rubbing his temples like she was some sort of nuisance. Look, kid, either you cooperate or we'll have to escort you out of the airport. You're a potential security risk. Savannah's blood ran cold. A security risk? I'm 15 years old. And you're causing a disruption, the man shot back. We need to resolve this now. Savannah's fingers twitched over her phone, the thought of calling her dad suddenly the only thing keeping her from losing it completely. She wasn't going to be bullied. Not by them, not by anyone. Savannah's thumb hovered over her dad's contact number, her fingers trembling so hard she nearly dropped her phone. She glanced at the security officer's glowering expression and made her decision. Enough was enough. She hit call. The phone rang once, twice. Then, Savannah? Her father's voice was rich and steady, a voice that had always made her feel safe, even from hundreds of miles away. Dad, she choked out, her voice trembling. I need you, now. The room went dead silent. The woman's pen paused in midair. The man with the radio lowered his hand like he'd suddenly forgotten how to use it. What's going on? Her father's voice sharpened instantly, losing the warmth it usually held. Savannah turned her back slightly to the agents, trying to keep her voice steady. They're trying to kick me out of the airport. They pulled me into some creepy room and said I'm a security risk just because I wouldn't let them take my picture for some ridiculous documentation thing." The security officer's expression twisted with annoyance. The woman's eyes darted nervously between Savannah and her phone, clearly wondering how much trouble they'd just gotten themselves into. "Where are you?" her father asked, his tone crisp and firm. "All business, all determination. Screening room B or something like that." "It's by gate 14, Savannah replied, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Miss, you need to end the call," the stocky man ordered, his hand twitching toward his radio like it was his only source of power. "No," Savannah snapped, her voice rising with the kind of bravery she didn't even know she had. "You can't just drag me out of here without giving me a chance to explain myself." "I'm on my way," her dad said, his voice the calm at the center of the storm. "Don't move. Don't say another word. I'll be there in 5 minutes. 5 minutes." That was all. But to Savannah, it felt like forever. The next 5 minutes felt like an eternity. Savannah stood stiffly, her back pressed against the cold, bland wall of the screening room. Her phone still clutched in her hand like a lifeline, her father's last words playing on repeat in her mind. "Don't move. Don't say another word." The TSA agents and the security officer had stopped talking altogether. They exchanged nervous glances, shifting awkwardly like kids caught doing something they knew was wrong. Savannah took a small, bitter comfort in the fact that they were rattled. Good. The woman with the clipboard looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. The man with the radio just kept glancing at the door, his fingers twitching as if wishing he could call in backup to save him from whatever storm was about to blow through. And then it did. The door swung open, and a man strode inside with the kind of confidence that silenced the room before he even spoke. His suit was crisp, dark gray, and perfectly tailored. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and his expression was pure steel. Savannah had never been so relieved to see her father. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking from the sheer relief of not being alone anymore. "Savannah," he said, his voice calm but layered with a cold fury she'd never heard before. He barely glanced at her before turning his full attention to the people who'd been making her life hell. "Who's in charge here?" The security officer opened his mouth to speak, but Savannah's father cut him off with a single raised hand. "No, you listen. I just spoke to the airport's general counsel. They know I'm here. Now, someone start explaining why my 15-year-old daughter was detained and threatened with removal from this airport." His words were like a slap across the face to everyone in the room. The woman with the clipboard's jaw clenched, her pen trembling in her hand. The man with the radio suddenly looked very small. "Sir, we were just—" "Name," her father snapped. "Now." "Patricia Dawson," the woman stammered, her eyes wide and fearful. "I'm with airport administration." Savannah's father's gaze swung to the man with the radio. "James Wilcox," the man replied, his voice tight. "Well, Patricia and James," her father said icily, "you're about to learn a very important lesson about harassment and unlawful detention, and I hope you're ready." Savannah couldn't help the smile that tugged at her lips. For the first time since this nightmare started, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were finally going to be okay. The walk back to the gate felt like something out of a slow-motion movie. Savannah walked beside her father, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her chin held a little higher now. Behind them, Patricia and James followed in stiff silence, their footsteps dragging like they were headed to their own trial. The other passengers in the terminal had started to notice. Eyes tracked their little procession, whispers stirred like wind through leaves. Some recognized Savannah from earlier when she was pulled away like a suspect. Now she was returning, but this time with someone powerful at her side. When they reached the gate, her seat was still there, untouched, her water bottle resting right where she left it. But the girl sitting down wasn't the same one who had curled into that chair hours ago, hoping for a smooth flight. Terrence Carter, her dad, turned to face the TSA officials. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Well?" Patricia cleared her throat and stepped forward, offering what might have been the weakest apology in TSA history. "Miss Carter, we apologize for the inconvenience." Savannah blinked. "That's it?" James mumbled. "We regret the misunderstanding." Her dad laughed, the cold, knowing kind. "No, you don't regret what you did. You regret who showed up." And that was the lesson Savannah felt settled deep in her bones. It wasn't about looking strong. It wasn't even about winning. It was about standing your ground when it would have been easier to stay quiet. She realized something important. People in power often bet on silence. They count on fear. But when you speak up, when someone shows up for you, they start to lose that power. That lesson? She'd never forget it. Savannah sank into her seat by the gate, her fingers still trembling slightly as she clutched her phone. Her father stood nearby, tapping something out quickly, and she knew what he was doing. This wasn't going to stay quiet. Not this time. What happened in that tiny screening room wouldn't be locked away or buried under some dry report labeled "Incident Closed." It would be shared. Loudly, publicly. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. She glanced at her dad, his shoulders relaxed now, but his face still carrying that sharp focus, the look of a man who knew the system and knew exactly how to hold it accountable. "Do you think this will actually change anything?" she asked softly. Terrence looked up, folding his hands calmly in his lap. "It already has." Ahead of them, a woman turned slightly in her seat and gave Savannah a quiet, knowing nod. A man passing by gave her father a look of recognition, or maybe respect. She couldn't tell. But in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt all day. Seen. Understood. She pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, and began typing, her thumbs moving faster than her thoughts. If you ever feel like you don't belong, like you're being singled out for something you didn't do, speak up. Don't let fear silence your truth. Your voice matters. Your story matters. The intercom crackled overhead. Flight 132 to Atlanta now boarding. Savannah stood, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and followed her dad toward the gate, not just as a teenage girl trying to get home, but as someone who had been through something unfair and chose to fight back. And maybe, just maybe, her story would help someone else do the same.